Let's officially start our conversation. So first, let me introduce the topic and our guest. All right, so thank you everyone for joining us today. It's a lovely day here. I know it's Saturday and our students have midterms from Monday, and still they spared some time to join us. And the topic today we are going to discuss is about China's global outreach. And I'm your host, Dr. Asif Amin. I'm a research fellow at CSSPR and assistant professor at School of Integrated Social Sciences, University of Lahore. And today we will be discussing on China's global outreach. We have seen over the past decades that China has emerged as a major power in international politics. And it has become a contemporary player in global politics. And many Western scholars and analysts are looking at China as a major player and a major threat, you may say, to the existing order, and the maneuvers on the both sides are being done in terms of containing China or counterbalancing. And so that's why today's conversation is very important. And the aim of our today's conversation is about to understand China's global security and economic initiatives, which is the vision of President Xi Jinping. He's been, since he has taken charge of the country, he has come up with revolutionary plans to revive China as a major player and a major power who is there at the center stage of the global world. And so this conversation for that is very important. So today we have Dr. Patrick with us. So I'm using his English name, but I would introduce him and with his Chinese name as well. So Dr. Yan has a PhD in history, and he's an assistant professor at Xuzhou University of Technology. He's a research fellow at Jilin University as well, at the Institute of International Studies. He was a visiting scholar to Sungkyung Kwan University, South Korea, and he teaches and researches in the area of international history, public diplomacy, and globalization. We warmly welcome you, Doctor, and it's an honor for us to have you as our first guest in this series of conversations. So
thank you very much, Dr. Asif. It is such an honor. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. So let's kickstart our conversation about how do you see China's current foreign policy in the contemporary international order. We see that we are facing so many conflicts. We have Ukrainian war. We have now a conflict boiling in the Gaza and Israel. And how do you see the Chinese policymakers are looking at these scenarios right now?
Okay, thank you very much. It's critical questions for the time that we are undergoing. At the moment, the time can be, in most cases, in most scenarios, described as chaotic. And we are somehow entering a new round of international conflicts, not only geopolitical conflict, but also the conflict over ideologies, over the competition in a high-profile technologies and science, etc. So the core question is how China and Chinese leaders and decision makers see and interpret, and also somehow explain it to the Chinese public and international audiences. I've been following some of the because I'm trained as a historian. I tend to view it in the long run, all the way through the founding of the People's Republic from 1949. There's kind of a clear line connecting and each dot of changes or turning points in the past 70 plus years of the PRC. The Chairman Mao and his comrades has been founded the People's Republic in 1949 and clearly visioned and view China not only as a socialist country, but also the country as the way it has always been, independent and civilizational. The most important of all should be keeping its standing independently on the world stage. So even though we have seen a lot of ups and downs, left and rights in Chinese foreign policy making, sometimes we see the scenarios and policy choices are contradictory. For example, in the 1950s, so we have aligned with Soviet Union. 1960s, most time we confront both Soviet Union and the United States. And in the 70s, we tend to build a cordial relationship and a rapprochement with the US and the West. And all the way till now, we are facing a more dramatic and contradictory scenarios. The relationship between China and the West and China and the world is getting more complicated, right? But somehow there's a principle that was never compromised. That China has to remain an independent country. The reasons or the background why China has been building and breaking away from our previous alliances or previous commitments or previous international standings, all because we never let go of independence. We shall always keep the decision-making powers within our own hands. We're making our own choices. So on this sense, any economic policies or political or diplomatic policies has to be built on this solid standing. And the solid standing of pursuing independence to some extent, in some extreme forms, like in the early 1970s, extreme independence, to be free of absolute no international interference or dependence. Like in the early 1970s, the Premier Zhou Enlai claimed proudly to his people that China is finally free from any international debt, foreign debt, no debt at all. Oh, sorry, the 1960s, when people are suffering from famine and hunger in a very difficult time in PRC. So if you try to understand Chinese choices or policy makings, you have to go from this standing point to understand Chinese obsession or Chinese overemphasis, Chinese people's carefulness in upholding and the protection of the pride and in national independence. Because of this, we have paid hugely in this century of humiliation, as any historians will recall, how China has suffered ever since the Opium War until 1949. Speaking of concrete, concise and recent developments, I would like to say that the very, very national interests, the structure of national interests certainly evolved from Deng Xiaoping's era to the Jiang Zemin's era, going all the way through the Hu Jintao's era. Now we come to the so-called new era under Xi Jinping's philosophy of building a socialism with Chinese characteristics. Because Xi Jinping's ascension to power by the end of 2012, he clearly has seen the world being no longer the same compared with the 1990s and the early 21st century, when the West has been adopting more of accommodating, or in terms of the language of the West, engagement, right? The era of engagement. Ever since the pivot to Asia of the Obama administration, roughly around 2010-11, the China has been experiencing lots of international pressures from the West. I still very vividly recall how Chinese society and Chinese government responded very strongly, even to some extent radically, to the Japanese nationalization of the disputed island, of Diaoyu Island, right? They call it Senkaku, we call it Diaoyu Island. That has sparkled kind of a down spiral of China's relationship with its closest neighbor, possibly the most relevant neighbor, Japan. Japan was somehow special among China's relationship with the West because it's culturally East, but politically West, but economically the second in the world until 2010. So at that time, we were quite frustrated, but somehow weakened by the cruelty and so-called the embedded realism in the Eastern Asian or international relations in general, saying that, see, this is still the old world we're living in. This is a world marked still by very much really struggles between China and the West, and it can easily drag us back into to the late 19th century somehow, when Japan has launched the kind of imperialist agenda against China and Korea in East Asia. So that was time, I believe, at least from a perspective of a student, I was a student at the time, that the world has now come into a turning point in terms of geopolitical struggle. If you peel off the beautiful code called globalism or globalization, you'll find that the national interests, somehow the hardcore national interest in terms of territory, in terms of international intervention, the world has largely remained the same at the time. So this has shaped Chinese decision-making or kind of, political mindset very much. And China has been try to readapt itself to the changing world, because we have sensed that the atmosphere is changing, apparently. And China also feel a little bit frustrated and feel a little bit betrayed by the US, because China has been chipping in a lot in terms of market bailout ever since the 2007-2008 financial meltdown from the US split over to the EU. We still remember how we are taught and how we discussed the Chinese rescue kind of activity to the US and to the EU, especially to the pig countries. Italy, Greece, Portugal, Spain. The pig countries have been suffering a lot in the economic and financial meltdown in Europe. So China's relationship with the West had experienced kind of a downturn, and almost at the same time, the Xi Jinping in the very first year as the president of China announced the Belt and Road Initiative. I would say that there's no simple coincidence of everything that's happening at the time, because certainly we have sensed that kind of insecurity of the China's bond with the West has been somehow deteriorating, and the projection might be in the long run, right? China's been irrevocably going into a deep troubled water with the West because the relationship is so complicated. And China certainly has to make and balance this kind of deficit of diplomacy by building even closer with its already established presence in the global South. My most impressive memory of China's engagement with the global South actually dated back to the 2006 China and Africa Forum of Cooperation, during which that more than 50 countries, more than 50 leaders or heads of governments were invited to attend the kind of cooperation forum in Beijing. That was an event of its kind of that year. And I do remember that we have signed a lot of agreements. We have made a lot of, renewed a lot of friendships with African countries. And that was kind of, I explained to my students that was kind of a sign of kind of a prototype Belt and Road of how China has been engaging very actively, building its own, offering its own projects and proposals about building and investing in infrastructure in Africa. And certainly the Belt and Road didn't just come from nowhere. It's come from very solid existing and practice that proved to be effective. China's economy certainly has been one of the most direct background to decide which action China can take, because simply we have enough international foreign currency revenues and stocks. We have so much savings so that we can we have the ability, to invest and to enter the new markets, the emerging markets. And it's certainly, even if you adopt a kind of a realist perspective, we can certainly see that China is creating its own fronts that is bypassing some of the fronts that has been already preoccupied, predominated by the West.
Doctor, I would
so in general sense,
jump in here, and I would just extend your conversation with asking you another question that is connected with your conversation, is about, as you're talking about the Belt and Road Initiative. And yes, we know that China has invested heavily in this ambitious project. And we see in Pakistan, we see China-Pakistan Economic Corridor as the flagship project of it, and it's in full swing as well. And we see that at one point for Pakistan, it's a positive gesture by China to invest in the developing world. But at the same time, in the West, it is seen with some criticism as well. So my question is that we saw during the pandemic, the Belt and Road Initiative somewhat slowed down. And then again, there was another initiative that has been taken by China with the vision of President Xi Jinping about the Global Development Initiative and Global Security Initiative and Global Civilization Initiative. So how do you see this? What are the ambitions of China if we look at these three initiatives, and why China is investing too much in these initiatives? And from Chinese perspective, is China looking for an alliance-making partners or strategic partners, or is it some sort of a hedge against the West, or is it a pure initiative for the development and the betterment of other developing nations, mostly if we talk about? So how do you elaborate it?
Okay, thank you very much for this for the insight. Also, this kind of putting. I should be very careful by avoiding some of the traps that you made. The comparisons, like why China has been while experiencing some deficits and economic downturn, by at the same time voicing up so much ambitious initiatives. Wow. I should say that China indeed has slowed down its investment during the pandemic simply because of the financial restrictions. China has been not wasting, I would actually say investing a lot by directing a lot of its reserves and also its resources domestically to tackle the economic difficulties at the time. In the past 2-3 years was extremely difficult for China. Even now till today, Chinese economic output expectations is not quite positive. I actually discussed yesterday with our common friend, Mahmoud Hussein, over this issue. I was quite honest to him that we are not actually getting out of this trouble very easily. The real estate basically collapsed. I actually worry a little bit about my real estate. My apartment in Changchun it's getting stuck somehow in the middle. I would like to say that China has indeed experienced these kind of difficulties, so that we slow down. It's natural, it's economical. We cannot fight the economic rules. But on the other side, why China initiated so much the three initiatives in a time of 1 year, almost 1 year and a half, right? It's because we simply has been shocked and also surprised, and also been battle struggle with the latest developments, the downward spiral, the degeneration of the international relations ever since the Russia-Ukrainian conflicts early last year. But certainly this kind of proposals or initiatives is not merely responding to criticizing Russia or to pointing fingers at certain parties, but we've seen that the rules of the game, or the existing, the established international rules, international laws, international regulations have been largely compromised through this kind of interactive, this kind of interactions that has been marked by hatred, marked by competition, marked by rivalries, and even bloodshed. So China has, actually projected and also welcomed and even urged somehow by these international partners, say that China, you have to say something. You have to provide something. The world now needs a sane voice, or a balanced voice, that we're not going to have to be pushed into picking up sides or taking extreme choices. So at the time, if you read very carefully in China's three proposals or three initiatives, I would rather say that there's quite something in the repeated rhetoric of Chinese domestic experiences in the past 4 decades of reform and opening up. Ever since 1979, we have been moving out of the extreme rhetoric, the extreme narratives of international relations, and focusing on peace and development. And the three initiatives, the first one is called development initiatives, is primarily can be explained in terms of economical cooperation. The second initiative is about security initiative. It's primarily about how we can better build diplomacy, build political trust between each other. It's a political initiative. The third civilizational initiative is rather about culture and ideology. So how the world can better mitigate and compromise over some of the issues that we cannot solve today, but maybe eventually can be solved over time. And so we can build more trust and also share more experiences that can eventually bring us out of this kind of mutual resentment and distrust. The trust deficit is crucial to explain what we experience today. So economical, political, and cultural initiatives are actually what we have learned and developed in the past 4 decades of reform opening up, along with the administrations of Deng Xiaoping, and Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao, and until today under Xi's leadership. In Chinese domestic scenario, I strongly recommend that without reading, without understanding Chinese domestic politics, domestic developments, you cannot simply understand China's international posture or international gesture, international outreach. Is that all these documents or policy makings are interconnected, because simply they are made by the same brain, the top leadership, right? And also the central government. And those policies are so interconnected so to make sure the Chinese voices can be consistent both domestically and internationally. I have been very much concerned about, and also be very attentive to the consistency of the domestic and also international information work by Chinese leadership. If you do this kind of comparison, you'll also be amazed and surprised to see how they are so inconsistent, both domestically and internationally. So there's no clear distinction between China's domestic politics and international politics.
Fascinating. Yeah. You explained it beautifully. And actually, my next question is also somewhat connected with my first question. And we have seen that since China has become more involved in international politics, especially after the pandemic, we have seen a revolutionary change in China's outward posture. China has become more involved in terms of, you may say, solving conflicts, or you may say being a mediator, or you may say providing a platform where you may say parties or groups or states who have some conflicts, so they could come and discuss. The example that we see is China's mediation between Iran and Saudi Arabia for the normalization of their relationships. And we also know that China imports its energy resources from the Middle East as well. So my question is that for China right now, if you look at China's economy, China's political posture and its trajectory, which region is most important for China right now? And where would China be more involved in terms of its strategy, its economic concerns, or its political clout? So that's my next question. That which region have more significance for China right now?
Okay, actually, these questions can be somehow complicated, and I shall answer it in a divisive forms. Like in terms of geopolitical, geopolitically, China is the most relevant region for China's geopolitical environment. Certainly, it's a neighboring area, especially East Asia, Southeast Asia. Now, the South Asia is getting relevance much more than before because of the difficulties with India. And increasingly, Central Asia is getting on Chinese media's headlines because of the opening up of a lot of trade, investments, and infrastructure opportunities ever since the Russo-Ukrainian conflict. So the Russians just naturally seeded somehow the influences by allowing Chinese business and Chinese investment into this region. So China actually is facing a very complicated environment, neighboring situations, while facing kind of how to say disproportionate kind of security and geopolitical urgencies or contingencies. While to some countries, we're facing some of the problems and issues we haven't been seeing for decades. But for some other regions, we're experiencing the most cordial, the most prosperous opportunities, like Central Asia. So in this scenario, I believe it is testing the Chinese leadership to carefully manage the neighboring environments and using probably if not all, most of these resources, to fuel and also to manage, to balance its neighboring environments. As for China's engagement or Chinese relationship with major countries like Europe and North America, so-called the global north, I would rather argue that we should maintain at least, not sacrifice too much of China's access to their markets and technology, and to keep ongoing the exchanges without compromising that much. However, unfortunately, we've been reading a lot of negativities in terms of developments of Chinese engagement with both regions, North America, the global north. And I do believe Chinese leaders are actually more or less disillusioned, to see that we're going to go back to the 1980s, see how we can restore our so-called honeymoon with the developed world. Yeah. So China is no longer the same China. As for the Middle East, China is certainly entering or being more relevant and a voice much more than before in the past several years. I remember that's 6 years ago when Wang Yi was, as a second term as the foreign minister, China already been stepping up to voice on behalf of the Arab countries, engaging more actively by consolidating the existing roadmap, the peace roadmaps in Palestine-Israeli conflict. And also China has been very much active in the past 3 to 4 years in engaging with the situation in Afghanistan. And along with other regional issues, probably the mediation between Saudi Arabia and Iran is the latest kind of climax, accumulative achievements, because China has been building trust in the past several years among the regional partners. Africa, I mentioned already, Africa has been China's vital economic partners, if not security. We have been, as a university, we have been receiving a lot of students, going on from African countries, because given its comparative economic backwardness, probably African students has been given most of the scholarships in Chinese universities. This has shown that China did continuously invest strategically to connect with African people, to build connections with Africa's future leaders, right? And also some of the targeted public diplomacy programs has been very much favoring African countries. That from Jilin University, we have the public diplomacy master program, right? Yes. Has been running for almost 10 years from 2014. And we have lots of especially there. Yeah, so many African students, and probably most of the kind of quotas or the memberships, the scholarships has been given to African candidates who are in most cases like mid-ranking officials or the people with certain kind of merits academically or scientifically. So they have been enjoying China's benefits towards investing in Africa. We're not actually depending Africa for fostering kind of alliance with China or building closer diplomatic or security pacts with China. That is beyond reality. But somehow I believe that Africa as a potential partners and also the already existing Chinese international investments testing field, if you allow me to use such a phrase, I believe Africa can serve as the best candidate for China to experience and also even to experiment its experience on this remote island, remote continent. Because if you can be successful in Africa, so basically you can be successful very comparatively easily elsewhere. I'm no way to discriminate Africa because Africa is, for me and for most of Chinese, kind of the virgin continent. A lot of opportunities, a lot of experiences, a lot of stories to be written over there. And maybe in the future, we can build a different continent together with African partners. That is something that is kind of a beautiful dream beyond merely making money out of this continent.
And actually,
this is
China's,
what I said.
It's more about, if you look at China, history of China's engagement with countries, we've seen China has always adapted non-interference policy in domestic affairs of countries, and that is one of the key components of China's goodwill gesture towards countries that it engages with, and the countries are welcoming China because of that. On the other part, we see that the Western countries, whenever they are, engaging with the countries, we see there is a lot of interference in domestic politics, and Pakistan has been a prime example of that. Whenever we have engaged with the West, especially the United States, that has happened with us. So my next question is quite relevant to our ongoing conversation, and it's about the role of great powers in institutions, the international institutions. And if you look at China, China is part of is chair of 4 international institutions, which is twice as much as the United States, United Security Council. And China has been active and playing active role in terms of using these international institutions for solving or raising its voice about the concerns in international politics. But at the same time, we see that, as we've talked about, that Africa has been important for China. China has been engaged with Africa since the 60s. And now, because of the Belt and Road Initiative, China has been engaging with other regions as well. So if we look at the success of China being a participant of international institutions and how we can measure it and how we can look at it, that China's role in institutions.
Okay. Yeah, this is probably one of the difficult questions I've been receiving because China, on one hand, say that we're not interested in intervening in any of the domestic issues, but on the other hand, China is getting more involved in international institutional making, which can be open to explanation that see China is trying to exploit the existing international institutions so they can make their own benefits for their self-national interests. Well, I'm not trying to say to portray China as somehow an angel or seeing that as a country based on its ideology on altruism. Certainly, China now, ever since the reform and opening up, trying to remake and rebuild China's international image from a revolutionary state to a kind of a reformist or a kind of a cooperative partners to most countries in the world. It's not particularly to the Western countries. I remember that ever since 10 years ago, in universities in China, the Chinese government has been very enthusiastic to build and to launch a lot of programs by getting Chinese students closer to international service. International service. So in many universities in China, there's a courses like the examination for international organizations, the principles and the laws of international organizations, and how we can make Chinese voice heard in international organizations, especially UN. You probably still remember how we in Jilin University in 2015 for the first time opened up kind of international model United Nations, which actually
I was the
fought
first
on.
participant.
Yeah,
and
you were there.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
I couldn't get the visa to United States.
That was quite competitive at the time.
Yeah.
Right. But you excel most of the contestants.
Yeah.
But the core challenges is China has been seeing such a huge deficit and an imbalance of Chinese, relevance and weight and the relevant kind of silence on the international stage. And most importantly, because especially for Chinese students and for Chinese cultures, we are reluctant, to voice up international relations. And this is kind of anxiety, at least among the educational circles. That see, we have been educating so many engineers. We have been educating and so many scholars in different fields, but simply there's no voice of China on the international stage, and especially the ones who can offer international public good. We see international organizations and the UN as a major platform to build and offer international public goods. So in the sense that of this kind of imbalances, we're using our systems, especially in terms of education, trying to get Chinese voices up in that. And we certainly cannot ignore the certain Chinese contribution to the UN. I don't have specific figures of numbers or statistics, but certainly I remember that we have Chinese share of the UN budget, the membership fees, the budget has been increasingly dramatically over the past decade, right? From roughly 2 to 3% to nowadays probably 9 to 10%, in terms of the budget of UN. Certainly, and in making that even, we are certainly need to have more voices and representatives in international organizations. Nowadays, we have seen a lot of students, a lot of scholars, a lot of Chinese officials has been very working actively with international organizations. I remember that in 2019, I had a conversation with a teacher, a teacher who has been affiliated to the Food and Agriculture organization in Rome, right? This UN Food and Agriculture, and he has been talking to me to see how welcome actually Chinese representative and Chinese the one who's in leadership. Forgive me, I forgot his name, as being actually got re-elected after that. At the time, China was actually not merely trying to get itself elected, but China actually more or less pushed to the front because the world needs China to voice up, to represent them even to a certain extent. Yeah, that's my observation.
As China is growing and China is becoming a major player in international politics, at the same time, China is adapting and I think embracing more responsibility in international politics as well. And the best way to exercise that responsibility is the international institutions. And yes, I think as China grows more and become a major power in international politics, it would be more proactive in international institutions as well. So I just have a small announcement for our participants that if you have any question, please write down your question in Q&A. At the end of our conversation, we would have a Q&A as well. And Let's go to the next question that I have. So as China launched Belt and Road Initiative, and China engaged with many countries, and China also provided soft loans and other loans for many developing nations, Pakistan as well as China's, you may say, one of the closest allies. We've been receiving a lot of investment from China as well. There has been criticism by the Western scholars that China's engagement is somewhat predatory, or it's a debt trap diplomacy, and they give they use Sri Lanka as an example, that how China took over their seaport, and China is going to do the same thing with other countries. As for Pakistan, they say that Pakistan would become an East India company for China. So how do you see it, and how you would answer China's involvement and investment in developing countries? What are the motives behind, and do you think the criticism that we are listening from the Western scholars or Western academia, is it true, or how we can justify it?
Okay, thank you very much. I've been thinking actually at least for the past 5 to 6 years, especially when with the, I remember in 2020 somehow around then, the kind of a bankruptcy of the Sri Lankan government, right? So they're leaving a lot of assets which cannot be paid back, so that a lot of terms can be open to interpretation of, see, China is actually successfully using debt trap to hook up the kind of and compromise the future of this country. There's a lot of redeemable explanations, says how China engaged with Sri Lanka by offering normal business contracts, and also the businesses and also investments which are free from any sovereignty violation guilt, if allow me to say that. Even this kind of 99 years of lease might somehow trigger historical memory, because China's, like Hong Kong, like some other seaports, has been somehow in this way by allowing colonialism entering. This is a very easy reminiscence of history, and I shall, however, explain in detailed terms. I believe that international relations we have been seeing today is a little bit different than the 19th century and early 20th century of colonialism, because of the international governance and the institutional frameworks actually disproves, and also the democratization of international politics disproves such an blatant exploitation and a violation of international rules of law. This is the one side, and since ever since writing and signing such agreement, I know from the very instantly this lease certainly contained no violation of sovereignty. The Hong Kong, if you did try to compare Hong Kong's experience or any of the concession, like in Shanghai, Tianjin, Wuhan, with Hambantota, there's no comparison, because there's no violation again with the sovereignty. And the sovereignty is highly a sensitized issue in Chinese historical memories. I still remember that I have a debate with American online in Twitter 8-7 years ago over why China is opening kind of its so-called supply base in Djibouti, right? So far, till today, this is the only Chinese military base overseas. And he has been seeing that, when China is growing up, when China is rising, China is simply repeating what the West has been done to Africans. At the time, I don't have much resources and to respond to his criticism. I would say that, if you check in kind of carefully in details, the very different understanding of sovereignty and also the established international rules of law certainly prevent China by entering that far to recreate colonialism or imperialism. That simply cannot allow. The legacy somehow, for example, the US military bases all over the world, and also the Western interferences like the France influences in West Africa, which, by the way, has been waning actually ever since the coup in recent countries
Let
in
them
West
use
Africa.
of force sometimes whenever they want. They use especially the France in Africa, it's adjacent countries, they still treat them as the colonies. Whenever they want to use force or they want to have an intervention, they just go there and do it. And we haven't seen such cases from Chinese side as well. And in terms of, if you look at Pakistan and China's relations, it's unique. It's based on, friendship, and I would say more of harmony. And the examples are that we're supposed to pay some of the loans, and China has waived some of the loans as well, and even given more, relaxation in paying back the debt in many countries.
Right, because the starting point is highly different. China compared with the West. The West is still enjoying its legacy and also its the shares inherited from the imperialism and colonialism. Allow me to say, the West is still enjoying the benefits. It's still living, actually building supremacy on the basis of that. China is not. Very beginning, all these kind of loans, international investments, the signing of the port lease, and also with the Djibouti military bases are all negotiated.
When I have a conversation with my students, and I always try to answer it in terms that if you look at China and if you look at the Chinese history, culturally, China has never had ambitions of colonization or domination of other regions. If you look at the early 15th century, China had the largest naval fleet in the world. And they went on a cultural expedition rather than, having a mindset of colonizing the world. So there is this difference. The Chinese culture does not allow of this expansion of imperialism or colonization. That's what I always try to tell my students, and whenever I have a conversation as well. So my next question is very important. Then I would let my co-host Syed to ask some questions as well. So my next question is related to China's global security initiative. And we have seen that China has been investing heavily in defense budget as well. We have seen an increase in building naval ships and modernizing its army, modernizing its air force as well. And by statistics, if we look at China's naval fleet or naval ships, China has become the largest naval force now in numbers. And security has been one of the primal concern for China. If we look at the South China Sea and East China Sea, the Malacca Strait dilemma, and now the West is even pushing to make alliances in terms of, containing China. So if we look at China and China becoming a major player in global order, let me add one more word, that the security world order that we have right now, which is predominantly, United States is the major player in it. As China is growing, and China's military is growing as well. So how do you see China's role in security world order in the future?
All right. Certainly China's relevance is getting on the nerves of the US hegemony, I should say. At least in West Pacific, Chinese naval forces has been such kind of presences cannot be neglected or avoided. And to some extent, the US security agenda has been very much framed by Chinese military buildup, right? Over Taiwan, over the islands south of Japan, Southeast Asia, especially with the Philippines. We have difficulties with the Philippines, and also with potentially other Pacific island countries, like in the past 3-4 years. Ever since China rebuilt relationship with the Solomon Islands, such this kind of islands that is not really known to all, became a really hot catch among the on the top of the list of American engagements, and also the rebuilding. I remember last year the United States reopened, or this year reopened its embassy in Solomon Islands, simply because they see China as a competitor, by winning all those Pacific countries over to China's side. So security has been certainly undergoing kind of a reshuffle, or the order has been rebuilt because China has been expanding its influences. This is unavoidable. It's unavoidable. But from Chinese perspective, how we can understand China's position on the security structure internationally, well, it's hard to say. On one hand, China still steadily modernizes its military. This is not kind of process can be reversed somehow, at least in the nearest future. China will certainly build more ships, been building, including aircraft carriers. China is certainly developing further its high-tech weapons and platforms, like the J-20 fighter jets. And China is certainly investing in the next generation of kind of a technology concerning international security, like satellites, like beam weapons. I don't know much about terms, military terms, but I know that China is certainly in some areas been leading those kind of developments, while the US has been restrained by its deployment, its aging facilities, the short-handedness elsewhere, because there's so much fire needs the US to put out. This is the latest and the new fire that has been going on in Israel-Palestinian conflict in Gaza. Okay, so certainly. So how should we? I actually cannot offer you a clear definition, clear reality.
Actually, you quite rightly talked about it. If we look at China, of course, when you are a major power, you definitely going to have rivals as well. If you look at international politics, the great power syndrome that Graham Allison talks about, the great power paranoia. When there's a rising power, the existing superpower is always going to feel threatened by the rise of the new power. And because of that, definitely there is going to be security concerns as well. And if you look at the United States, who has been dominating the global security order, would look at China as a rival. And when China is increasing its influence in regions, definitely the United States would challenge it. And rightly so, China has all the rights to modernize its military and have more defense budget as well. And so now let me invite Syed Rutt. She's my co-host today, and she's also a research fellow at CSSPR and lecturer at School of Integrated Social Sciences. And she has some questions that she would want to ask you as well. And we don't want to stop this fascinating conversation. And I hope our audience is enjoying it as well. So now, Ms. Rutt, it's over to you. Please shoot your questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Asif. So I'll take over now. Thank you so much, Dr. Patrick. You have been enlightening us on some very important topics. And so I will continue with the questions. And I think that it is very aptly highlighted by you that China has been working on different fronts, nearly on all fronts, diplomatic, whether that's economic, diplomatic, political, or other, etc., all the other fronts. So in this case, as we see that many a times Chinese scholars have been criticizing the global governance, the contemporary model of global governance. So how do you think that as we see that the contemporary model of global governance is influenced by the West? So in future, do you see that China has the ability, or it may has the potential to basically challenge the contemporary model of global governance that we see today?
Okay, this is a critical question, and I believe this question concerns China's general visions, how we should build our relationship, China's relationship with not only the global North, but also global South concerning the global governance. Because ever since 1945, the founding of the UN, the very basic spirit of UN, on one hand, is to secure peace, the World War shall never repeat again. The second hand is how to foster global development by sharing opportunities with the latecomers, to making sure we're going to have a fair, just, and workable international economic partnerships and international developmental models. So far, in the past 70 years, we, especially from the perspective of global South, we are very unfortunate to say that this is not happening. At least this is not fully realized. It's not materialized. It's not delivered. So I believe with China's rise, with China's voice up in global governance, with China's kind of presence is getting more and more relevant, I believe China will voice even louder on behalf of global South, on behalf of developing countries, to restore the spirit, to regain the spirit and regain the confidence of the global South in building a fairer and also more just international economic order, which has been very much exploited to favor by the West, especially in the age of neoliberalism. And neoliberalism has been highly exploitative to favor the developed industrial countries. And China certainly will, championing this kind of readaptation and a regaining of the spirit of international governance to help global South to build and develop themselves. And China actually is doing it by building a lot of partnerships along with the G20, with the BRICS countries, with the further expanded Belt and Road initiatives, which I believe has been very much aligned with the spirit of the UN. Yeah.
So my
this is
yeah.
It is
So my second question is
it is very hard. Sorry, please.
Sorry. So my second question is basically very, you can continue with the same question as my second question is also similar to the first one, as you were already mentioning that China has been investing in global South, and there are many investment opportunities that China has in the global South. And similarly in Africa, in the African continent, it has been a virgin continent. It has been, there has been no such interference into that continent specifically. And then there is Central Asia, which is being for a long passage of time till now, it is being ruled. One would say that it is more influenced by the Russians. So what do you think that in case of Central Asia, what opportunities does lie for China? It is a very resourceful region. Yes, it has a lot of resources. China can have fulfill its energy requirements from Central Asia. So how do you see the significance of Central Asia, that how it can help China meets its future requirements?
Okay, thank you very much. I should combine actually your first and second question together, and I continue my talk on this in this respect. My central argument is that China's global engagement and China's commitment to the development of global South is not to try to fill any political vacuum or influence vacuum, or to create China's sphere of influence overseas. Rather, China has been doing and investing in global South in terms of awakening the global South to realize their potentials and also their relevance in international relations. If you say China is trying to build alliance, I would rather say that yes, China is building an alliance on the basis of equality and sharing the globe, and how we can better work together to share our common future. So that is actually this is actually in line with the spirit of the we're building a kind of a
shared future.
Community of shared future. For mankind. Exactly, because China has seen its alliance not with power politics, but in alliance with the community and the sharing, and also how we can mutually and together build a cooperative future. Because if you allow power politics to occupy your mind, you are perceiving the world in the zero-sum fashion, in a zero-sum game. Your winning is my losses. But if you do believe that the pie can be expanded, or the world can work together to produce something beautifully that has never been seen before, then we are on a win-win scenario. So in the situation of Central Asia, I believe that China is actually trying to use its presence to win true friendship and lasting friendship by making Central Asian countries as well as global south that we are equal. We are partners. By working together, we can solve our differences and to achieve something that is mutually desired. In terms of Central Asia, it can be much more tricky because it still carries on the security legacy of the Soviet Union, right? Even until the early last year, Russia still play a pretty much dominant role in Central Asia. Even after the warning of Afghanistan, the US has been temporarily stationed and dispatched to Central Asia by building several of the aircraft bases in this region, but Russia is still mainly dominant. But we should never ignore the very demands and also the self-awakening of the Central Asian countries themselves. There's simply no country has been willingly to be subordinate to the influence of others. That is spirit and a potential of the democratic future of international order, and China actually welcomed it. China see every country, regardless big and small, every country as sovereign equals. So we build our partners, build our friendships on the very basis. That is actually, I believe, the only way in the future that we can truly nurturing a healthy and a lasting friendships. Yeah, but not try to find proxies, to find a kind of build a kind of a relationship built on, you totally depend on me so that you should listen to whatever I ordered you to do. So this is not a world China is efficient.
Nice.
Okay. So if we see that the current contemporary world order is basically shifting towards a new form of world order, which we would say a tech world order. So, and China has been a very dominant player in that case. So, what do you think that in future will China will have the ability to rule this tech world order, or how it can emerge as a very dominant player in this new type of world order? Because as we see, China has been progressing in its technology. There has been a lot of technological advancement as far as China is concerned. So how do you think that it can play a very dominant role in future?
Let me jump in, just add one more point in it, that we've seen that when China launched 5G technology, it faced, you may say, some sort of backlash from the West. And they have some sort of created a hedge against that. We're not going to allow China to bring in their latest technology. Because historically, we have seen that the technology has been coming from the West. And the Silicon Valley is the example of that. And now we see in China has been growing. The Shenzhen has become the Silicon Valley of China as well. So we've seen China investing heavily in semiconductor, the chip industry. And do you think, is it something that China wants to be, independent from the West in terms of having these nanotechnologies? Or is it some sort of, you may say, challenging the existing Western technologies, the emerging technologies, with the artificial intelligence as well?
Okay, let's read it from two kind of perspectives. On one perspective, if you categorize and if you put technological competition in power politics, yes, indeed, I do believe so. The technology, especially semiconductors, matters much more than one or two aircraft carriers. Even more than in the long run, how China's naval force has been rising to challenge the dominant Western dominant naval forces of the United States. Indeed, because the Deng Xiaoping already claimed 40 years ago that technology and science and technology is the first productivity. It's number one productivity. It's the ultimate drive for your economy to grow. that's not to be disputed. I believe so. I truly believe that. So China in the past decades has been investing heavily on generating and building, and also on many occasions the science and technologies, so that China can have what we have today as a leader of 5G, as a leader in engineering, even as one of the pioneers in making out the Chinese outer space stations, etc., etc. We have so many leads in many fields, which actually certainly making the United States and the West very nervous, because they see this as a sign of the losing edge in power politics, because technology is very convenient to be translated and transformed into real power. The technology is real power, it's hard power. Somehow, on the other side, technology and science and technology is the least thing that you can simply, however, monopolize. It's the least thing you can monopolize. I still remember in an interview with the leader of Huawei, Mr. Ren. He was talking about how they are being working so hard to work out kind of a solution in their 4G or 5G technology. He mentioned that in these nights and days, our workers, our scientists, has been working so hard to work out. There's a scientist, a very young scientist from Russia. He's a mathematician. He has been focusing and also stay put in front of the screen. And finally, one day, after several days and nights, they see problem solved, because of so many devoted and also so many talented people who are willing to sacrifice for these common projects. This common projects doesn't necessarily be monopolized or belonging exclusively to any nation or to any specific fields, because inherently technology is shareable.
Yeah.
And there's no single country that can actually say that we claim the full authority, the full control over certain technology, like what we had before the nuclear technology, right?
Yes.
Like what we had before the space and rocket technology, like we had before the computer technology. You simply cannot shut the door and say we're going to work out the best solutions to lead the future. It's not workable. The brains and exchanges, communications are the key, are the lifeline for technology. And I believe by making a careful arrangement to share technologies with partners, with like-minded people like Pakistan and China. The recent announcement, I didn't know whether you pay attention to, is that the Chinese Space Authority announced that we're gonna invite, in the next step, invite foreign astronauts to land on Chinese space station. And we already had a list, even including some of the geopolitical competitors like India. We welcome Indian astronauts if they're willing to participate. They're welcome to board our space shuttle and to go on the Tiangong space station, because we believe that by sharing technology is the best way to advance our technology. So on these two scenarios, because technology has its own kind of rules. If you want to try to develop it, open up and further open up, so that you can still leading kind of this this fashion.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I just would like to add one more point here. I was listening to a lecture given by John May Scheiman, and he was talking about that, yes, China and the United States, they are the two major powers right now, if you look at them. And yes, there are many fronts where they are, competing against each other. But at the same time, this new emerging order, which is the tech order, that we can use this technology in terms of the climate security, and this is a platform where there's an immense potential to collaborate in terms of space technology as well, or space missions as well. So you're absolutely right that this is something shouldn't be confined to one person or one state. It should be something that would do better for the humanity or for the civilization of this planet. Because if as human beings, and we are rational beings, and we have been, on this course of innovation, and with the time, the innovation has becoming faster and faster. And now we are having this technological world order where definitely technology is not going to be one country's property. It's going to there are going to be diverse players in this field.
Right.
Yes.
I would also like to add in it that I think that technology is something which is a very, very important aspect of the 21st century. We have seen times when military was very important, the conventional aspects of a state were very important, but now and there is a time when the politics of the world was being ruled by the economics, and now is the time for technology, that if a state needs to be relevant in the world politics, it needs to advance itself, progress itself in the field of technology. So in that aspect, I think that China, it's very, very important for China to remain progressing in this aspect. And whatever the criticism comes from the West, that I think comes from the unsaid insecurities that the West has when it comes to China. So I think that's very, very relevant in this case. And secondly, there's another thing that we have entered into an era of digital grade game, which we would say a digital grade game. So in that aspect, with the advancement in artificial intelligence, do you see that it can bring any change to the contemporary international order, or it can have its impact on the international order?
Yeah, thank you very much. Honestly, haven't get my thought straight up in this seemingly new but already very old technologies. AI has been emerging actually almost the same time, synchromatically with the computer sciences. Actually in the 1950s and 60s, we already developed in America the first generation of artificial intelligence. We call it lower AI. Now we have a higher forms of AI, and the least occupied the topic international news is about the OpenAI's kind of a leadership in making the common consumers to be accessible to the benefits of AI, generative AI, right? So if allow me to venture in this topic, I would say that AI is indeed probably a revolutionary area of science that can lead probably the next generation of technology and science. And eventually AI in the most ideal form gonna reshape the international productivity outlook or structure. Means that it would take away and replace and refill most of the labor concentrated work that is being at current stage one of the most important sources or places for employment. So on this stage, there's gonna pro and a con for both sides. It means that in the short run, lots of people are gonna lose their jobs. But in the long term, it means that people are no longer be, however, hungry or facing the challenge of scarcity. I myself probably be the last generation in my early years who has experienced the real situation of shortage. I still remember in my childhood, I watched my parents by getting the food stamps, food coupons, to get their shares from the food station. When I was probably 5 or 6 years old, that situation's gone into history. But with AI, with the full employment of AI in agricultural, in manufacturing, probably in our generation and the next generation, the people of the world will be free from such kind of a shortage. This is one of the most beautiful outlook that we're probably going to expect. But I also noticed that there's a lot of debate about whether UI gonna be a potential competitor in terms of usurping mankind's dominance over our own agenda. I mean, it's gonna transform itself from a position of a nanny into a lord, right? By taking control, for example, all the power supplies, making control all the sources of distribution, especially banking systems. How are we going to deal with that? Are we going to have kind of a real kind of a situation of terminators? Probably this is the open scenarios for us to think about. And I'm no AI experts on this, but I respect this kind of view because it is always in this kind of thinking, kind of a risk mentality that saved human race from extinction, saved human race from avoiding stepping into unnecessary or irredeemable traps created by technologies. We used to have the most dangerous weapons on Earth, the nuclear weapons, and we can tend to have probably the most dangerous, partners, AIs, who can either help us or destroy us in the future. And also, I respect the voices by Elon Musk. Elon Musk has been very vigilant over the prevalent AI, right? Over the world.
Whenever there is these these brilliant guys, these geniuses, whenever they have meeting, they are talking about the regulations with emerging technologies, because artificial intelligence is a phenomena that is something new for us, and we are concerned about it. At the same time, it has a lot of benefits for the human race, especially if you look at the recent cases in Libya, in Yemen. They used artificial intelligence surveys, and they used artificial intelligence in terms of resolving these conflicts. So at the same time, it is useful, but at the same time, there are concerns. And definitely, when we sit together as a human civilization, when we have a rationale, we leave our preferences behind, then I think we can come up with something that can actually help this human race.
Right.
Thank you.
Indeed, I agree.
Yes, we have some questions from the participants as well. Ms. Rutt, would you please read the questions?
Yes, we do have some questions from the participants as well. I hope all the participants did enjoy all the discussion on this very contemporary issue. So we will be starting with the first question. So it has been asked that we have seen the recent development where there is an initiative in the form of the India, Middle East, Europe corridor. So we know that the CPEC, or in the larger context of BRI has many major objectives, and it is a huge project. It has enormous benefits for the participating states as well as the allies of China. So in this case, do you think that this recent initiative can challenge BRI, or can it affect can it be an effective counter strategy for China?
Okay, I'm certainly I'm aware of the latest kind of a joint initiative, especially by the US. Has to be essentially benefiting the local economy and local people. If such initiative can be materialized, we have no reason to object. Okay, as long as it benefits local economy, local people, so that their lives can be modernized, their choices are open, they can be more engaged with the globalization, etc., etc. It shall be encouraged and also welcomed somehow. But in terms of to materialize an infrastructure project, and especially when the infrastructure project is in need, essential to its own, without coated with without being inserted with political agenda or security agenda, then such kind of initiative shall always be looking rather the same with BRI, I believe. If you treated BRI as a prototype, as a pure mutually beneficial economic projects between China and any country along BRI blueprint. So I believe that in this way, I'm highly suspicious of India and the US's intention in building kind of alternative way of investments. On the one hand, they lack of material incentive in doing this, meaning that they're simply not ready to offering large amount of money, to invest large amount of money, and by offering high quality projects in the into local communities. And I seriously respects the choices of local people by choosing partners, because no people is stupid. Every country is rational. Every people know that which plans is best for them for the future generations. They will make sane choices by building partnership with and aligning with true partners that can in the long run benefiting their own people by not sacrificing their sovereignty. So in this sense, I basically have no worry over this kind of assumed competition, because simply I believe there shall be no competition if the world can be built, it can be connected. The interconnectivity shall always be encouraged as long as the basic principles of sovereignty, equality, and sharing are respected. Otherwise, this is simply going to be a project on paper, not in reality. Yeah, that's my view, but it can be somehow idealistic, but yeah, I truly believe so. Thank you.
And secondly, I assume that at the point where we see BII today, the initiative, the counter strategy is just on its beginning. It has not even attained the first step of its strategy. So the point where we see BRI today is at a very developed stage, and any initiative at this point would actually not be very harmful to BRI. So continuing with the questions from the participants, the second question that we've been asked is that we have seen that US has been very when it comes to the East Asian region specifically, or the Asia Pacific in that sense, US has been very dominant in that region. US has many allies, whether that is Japan or whether that is Philippines or Singapore. So it has many troops over there. It is establishing the naval bases. All these alliances are enabling US to stand their allies over there, and they are basically the US is. It is a very enabling environment for the US to challenge China in the region. So in that aspect, do you think that US would attain that position, a stronger position in the East Asian region? And what could be the alliance system in that case? Will these states concentrate more on having building its relations with US rather than China? What do these Asian regions, what options exist for these East Asian regions, countries, sorry.
All right, thank you very much. I believe that...
Sorry, I would like to just add one more, it's also a question from the audience. I just like to add. We talked about that these countries, we have seen ASEAN as a regional organization has been very successful. On the other hand, we have seen SAARC, which is Southeast Asian organization that has, not as successful as ASEAN is. And China has initiated many
organizations. SEO is the example that has been very successful. BRICS has been very successful. So in terms of building economic and strategic organizations, do you think our region has been successful, especially in terms of China, the role of China and other great power, which is Russia, or we may say India, in our region?
In South Asia?
Yeah, in the Southeast Asia, I'm talking about the Asian region, not just
Okay.
South.
Okay. Right. Let me discuss about the U.S. relevance and also U.S. Alliance system in East Asia, which actually primarily taking shape after the Quad, the AUKUS, and also the latest developments with Korea, South Korea, Japan, the U.S. The trilateral kind of security framework has been taking shape. And this has been certainly interpreted by China as a potential threat, naturally, because this region is our region. We're so close to it. Our center for our most important industrial output, our industrial centers, financial centers are in this region. So indeed, this is a most relevant region that U.S. and both U.S. and China see as a major playground. But for anybody, for everybody, especially for researchers to read this the situation, the very perspective of China and U.S. certainly matters, but their relevance actually, I believe, it should give a little bit more away to the local participants. Is we have to look very carefully about how Japanese, how Koreans, how ASEAN people view about their position and their future in this region. And also China has been always very respectful in view and also to give voices to their relevance. Like China more than once, together with some other countries, claimed that in Southeast Asia, the ASEAN countries are the leaders. They are the masters of their own region. All these arrangements has to be centered around ASEAN, the international as well as individual countries' position in this area, so that we shall not always align or associate local conflicts with great power politics, because it's not really the situation. And this is a very fact we have to respect. So China has been, on one hand, allowing, actually, not allowing, by agreeing on to some extent the U.S.'s relevance, because it's a historical legacy. The U.S. is not simply going to go away completely tomorrow, overnight. This is a reality we have to accept. And we certainly respect any country who has been all trying to align with U.S. and doing somehow military exercises, opening naval bases to U.S. navies, etc. If you do view and also review the Chinese state media and Chinese websites, China has not really openly criticized any Southeast Asian countries once they re-engage with the U.S. in terms of military cooperation. No, we believe their sovereign choice. But we always keep a very vigilant eye on the U.S. expansion militarily in this region, because whenever there's a U.S. kind of so-called freedom of navigation kind of operations in South China Sea, we use basically the same rhetoric, same tone, saying that the outsiders, especially referring to the U.S. navies, the outsiders should always respect the local people's choices, local people's agreement or consensus in the region, by not creating troubles between the neighboring countries, because we interpret. We tend not to criticize, the one who align with U.S., but to mention that their choices has been more or less forced in this general framework of U.S. ambition in this region, which U.S. is indeed an outsider. So in this sense, we urge the U.S. all the time to play fair and play openly and play as non-interventionist role in this region. Probably, I mentioned Southeast Asia, but indeed, the most relevant security presence in the nearest term is South Korea, North Korea, South Korea, and Japan. They are economically more powerful, more capable to influence China, and also to help shape China's own strategic and security choices. So, but still, in diplomacy, in most of the situations, we try to all the time to create kind of platforms. So the problems between China with South Korea, the problems between China and Japan are within ourselves. We try to make things clear by excluding, this kind of interventionist third party in this big picture. But when China was pushed to the extreme, to the corner, we would inevitably drag the US into this kind of a situation. But indeed, I believe in terms of rhetoric, in terms of policy making, we try to encourage the independence, strategic independence of the partners of this region by saying that we fully respect your sovereignty, and your independent country shall have your own strategic choices free from any intervention globally. And we speak the same with our European partners, with France. We speak with Germans. We speak with the British. We speak with everybody, basically the same tone. We respect your sovereignty, you respect us, and we fully shall conduct our partnership, our relationship on a non-interventionist bilateral or multilateral situation. So in this way, China basically has withheld its moral and also moral standing and also its reason. So basically, it's flawless. It shall not be, criticized from any regional players. But U.S. simply did not really read or say in the same line. They always say that China is actually as an expansionist in this region. The Southeast Asians, the Koreans, Japanese should be very careful when they see the Chinese is coming. You have to rely on the U.S. or align with us because we share some values, etc., etc. So basically, we are speaking two types of diplomatic languages with the U.S., and neither can be subdued or can be convinced somehow. Each of us has adopted different lines. But we shall see. China basically do not really associate the political pressures with economic pressures or with security pressures. We try to use kind of a distinct and separate kind of language to deal with our partners in the region. Yeah, this is so far the way we do to engage our neighbors in East Asia.
Yeah, you have rightly explained it in a comprehensive manners, and we are running out of time. And at the end, we have Ali with us. He's our colleague, and now he's pursuing his PhD in the United States, and he would like to ask a question, and he would like to add something. Ali, please, you can ask your question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yan. It was a fantastic conversation. I do appreciate how wide-ranging it was, and how you covered the entire canvas of what China is doing in many a realm. I don't particularly have a question. I do want to make a comment on one particular aspect. I do believe, and you have also at the end alluded to it. The United States, unfortunately, I guess, does not have the tools to counter China in the Indo-Pacific or the Asia-Pacific, whatever you want to call it. I say this because both countries have a very different approach to looking at international relations and global politics, and the usual toolkit that the US had was militarized alliances. But now with China's economic incursions in the region and beyond, that alliance system is, I believe, crumbling. If you see the Quad, if you see other kinds of alliances, you do realize this one particular problem, that the alliances are not, and that the allies are not fully on board with the US. They're trading with China. They are involved in constructive partnerships with China. Yes, they will side with the US when it comes to condemning China, but that's only so much that they can do. They can't push. They can't go the extra smile because China gives those countries exactly what the US is not able to give them: economic prosperity and security. And if you have good supply chains, those countries have good developments. And I was so we have had this conversation many a time before. If there's this one book by Dan Markey, China's Vision Horizon, and he gives a very interesting thesis in which he says that it's Kazakhstan, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and Iran that have pushed China more than China has pushed itself in those countries. So this is something that the US needs to understand, and that's about it. I thank you. I thank you. I really thank you for a very wide-ranging conversation. I look forward to having our conversations later on. Thank you.
Thank you.
so much,
Thank you very much, Charlie. I should say, chipping a few words, I totally agree with your input and insight. I rather say that this came to my mind. I think that the best weapon, the best strategy to counter alliance is not to build alliance or to convert the alliance of US into an economic partner. Probably the best choice we have, and it's what China is actually doing in the moment, right? Yeah, you provided weapons to the alliances. I provide economic opportunity to alliances to see which one can last. Thank you very much. I truly enjoy and I like your comments on this. Thank you very much.
It's been fascinating. Thank you so much, Ali. All the way from the United States, and I know it's very late there. It's almost morning there, right?
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for the questions. Excellent questions by you and Rutt.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ali. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Patrick, it's been fascinating conversation with you, and we really enjoyed your insights and your answers, and we really enjoyed this conversation. And I hope our audiences also enjoyed this first webinar, or you may say the conversation. It's a series of conversations that we would be having over time, and we would be having guests from different regions of our earth, or you may say our globe, and we will have different perspectives from different people. Sir, thank you so much. You've been so kind, and you spared your time with us, and we would like to end our conversation here. And I'm looking forward to having more avenues that we can discover, and we can talk about these contemporary issues and further even write something about it. Thank you so much. We will upload the recording of this conversation on our social media platforms. And next time I want to see you in person at my university.
Sure. Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, take care. Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. Take care.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Rutt. Thank you for a wonderful organization of this event, and enjoy the rest of the weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, take care.
Take care.
Bye.